Hello, everyone, and welcome to Participating in Clinical Research, What You Need to Know. My name is Katie Howe, and I am the Clinical Trial Navigator for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. I will be starting the session today, but before I do, I wanted to provide a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be available after the event on the CF Foundation's YouTube channel. You will be notified by email when session recordings are available. We will be taking audience questions during this session. We encourage you to submit your questions at any time into the chat. We won't be able to answer questions about individual diagnoses or treatment plans, and we encourage you to use the information you learned today to have conversations with your care team. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. Next slide. A few disclosures before we begin. There are no relationships to disclose related to this presentation. Next slide. To advance drug development and a search for a cure, the CF Foundation has contracts with several companies and has received or may receive milestone-based payments, equity interests, royalties on the net sales of therapies, and/or other forms of consideration. Resulting revenue received by the CF Foundation is used in support of our mission. More information about our model is available at cff.org/industry. Now I'm going to hand it over to Heather Hathorne, and she will discuss the basics of clinical trials.
Thank you, Katie. My name is Heather, and I'm a research coordinator at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I've been at UAB for about 22 years, and it's great to be with you tonight and just discuss the basics of clinical research. Next slide, please. So I thought we would start with a definition. What is research? Research is a very systematic investigation. So that means it's a very predetermined method for studying a specific topic or answering a specific question. It may include testing and evaluations. This may be medical tests. This may be surveys, questionnaires, or observations. And research is designed to contribute to knowledge. So we're looking for that gap, or what is that question that we have that we don't understand, that we need to know so that we can move the field forward. Next slide. So how does the foundation conduct research? Well, that's through the Therapeutic Development Network, or the TDN, and the TDN Coordinating Center, or TDNCC, which is located in Seattle, Washington, and is the coordinating center and manages all the sites for the network. The TDN was launched in 1998 and included 7 sites and has expanded and grown over time to now include more than 90 research centers across the United States. And together, these research centers conduct a mix of research trials. This may be industry or studies sponsored by Big Pharma, or CF Foundation sponsored research, or federally funded multi-center studies. Next slide. So I do want to highlight the CF Foundation Therapeutic Pipeline, and you can explore the pipeline on the Foundation's website, but you can see we have a very robust pipeline exploring many new therapies coming at CF from many different angles. Of course, the new genetic-based therapies, you can see those are very early phase in the pipeline. We have new modulators that are being studied, anti-inflammatories, anti-infectives, and nutritional compounds. And I encourage you to certainly explore the pipeline in more detail. You can click on a compound that you may have questions about and find out more about where that drug is in the clinical trial process. Next slide. So let's talk about the phases of clinical research. Clinical trials build on each other and direct new research. And if you notice, or if you remember from the previous slide in the pipeline, you can see where each compound is in these phases. And there's 4 phases of clinical research. Phase 1 usually is short in duration, has a smaller number of participants, and the focus, mainly we want to know, is it safe? Is this drug safe? And we want to learn more about the dosage. Do we have that correct? And then as we move from phase 1 to phase 2, the duration is going to get longer and the participants are going to increase, possibly to several hundred. And the focus here is efficacy. That means, does the drug work? And what are the side effects? And as we move into phase 3, the duration is going to get even longer, multiple years here, hundreds to thousands of participants. And in phase 3, we're continuing to study more about efficacy. How does it work with a greater number of people involved in the research? And then we can track safety with greater numbers and continue to look for adverse reactions or side effects. And after phase 3 is usually when FDA approval would take place if the study makes it through these different phases. And after FDA approval is when you would see a phase 4 study being conducted, and this is known as post-marketing research. These studies are several years in duration, include thousands of participants, and again, we're focusing on long-term data, safety, and learning more about efficacy and side effects. Next slide. So if you've decided to participate in a research study, you may be asking, well, what does that look like? What do the visits look like? What are the assessments? Well, that's going to vary from protocol to protocol and depend on the type of protocol you may be participating in. Visits could range from 1 hour to overnight visits if you were participating in a very complex study. They could involve follow-up studies. Follow-up visits once the study is complete. Assessments may include vital signs, general things like blood pressure, heart rate, height and weight, blood draws, EKGs, pulmonary function testing or chest x-rays. You may be asked to complete questionnaires or surveys, and it's not uncommon in a CF study to be asked to provide a sputum sample. All studies usually reimburse for travel. This is going to be arranged by the research site and the sponsor, and you should be able to receive reimbursement for any mileage, meals when you're traveling, hotel stays, and compensation for your time. But it's important to really discuss this during the informed consent process and make sure you understand what the travel and reimbursement guidelines are. And they may look different for every center depending on their institutional policy. So reimbursement may be in the form of a debit card that is immediate after the study visit, or at some centers it may be a check you receive in the mail that could take longer. So it's really important to talk through that with the study team and understand what reimbursement and compensation looks like. And there's always challenges to participating in research, right? Time is a challenge for everyone. There's time commitment involved. Sponsors sometimes change things in the study. Those are called protocol amendments. And when they do that, it may add assessments or add additional visits that you may have to sit down again and talk about, what is this going to look like? How am I going to accomplish this? School and work can always be challenges to overcome. Some centers may offer after-hour visits or weekend visits to accommodate school and work. So it's always important to ask if that center has those options available. Next slide. So how will your safety be protected? This is a very important question, right? The U.S. government has very strict guidelines and safeguards in place. This includes protections like the FDA, and they have guidelines that sponsors and study sites have to follow. Study sponsors are held responsible and are required by the FDA to have guidelines in place for how they're going to conduct studies and what their safety monitoring plan looks like. The CF Foundation adds additional safety measures for trials in CF, and this includes the Therapeutic Development Network. We have a TDN Scientific Review Committee that includes CF experts in the field who look at the scientific merit of the study and the safety plan. We also have a data safety review board that is part of the TDN, which again includes CF experts in the field that come together and monitor side effects in real time so that we can identify a risk should it pop up and act quickly. And then institutions are going to have institutional review boards in place, and these departments at academic universities are responsible for monitoring safety, but also putting regulations in place that protect the rights of human participants and their welfare. And then the study team is also another layer of protection. You're going to have a screening visit before you enroll in a study to even make sure it's safe for you to participate. And you're certainly a layer of that protection as well. You'll have the chance to review an informed consent and make sure that the study is right for you. So what are the risks? Well, risks are going to be different for every clinical trial, and you may experience side effects to medications or treatments. You may receive a treatment that doesn't work for you. An informed consent will explain all the study risk, and you should go over that in detail with the study team. Next slide. So let's talk about the informed consent. What exactly is that? It's a document that you sign before you enroll in a study, and it provides all the information that you need about that trial. And the study team will review the consent with you before you participate. And if you don't understand something, you should certainly ask. The research team wants you to ask questions. And you can take the informed consent home. You should take your time and think about it. Review it with your friends and your family or care partners. And once you feel your questions have been answered, then you can sign and date the consent, and you should be given a copy for your records. And it's important to remember that the informed consent is not a contract. You can stop your participation in a research study at any time, and that doesn't have any negative impacts for you in your clinical care. Next slide. So what's your role as a participant? Well, you should try as best you can to follow the study plan. Keep your study appointments, complete your diaries, questionnaires. If there is a drug involved in the study, maintain those dosing schedules. Communicate with your study team. It's important to keep your study doctor informed about how you're feeling and discuss your concerns. And before you enroll, you should know who to contact. Should you call the research team or should you call the clinical team? And how did they communicate when you're participating in a study? It's important to understand that so that you know who to call and that everyone is on the same page. And your safety is the priority. Always remember that. You can stop or opt out if it's not in your best interest to continue. And the PI, that's the principal investigator or the study doctor, or the sponsor can also decide to withdraw you from a study if they have concerns or if they see side effects that are concerning and they feel like it's in your best interest to withdraw. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Katie to discuss navigating.
Thank you, Heather. And as Heather mentioned, and as I've already introduced myself, I'm Katie Howe. I'm the clinical trial navigator for the CF Foundation, and I'm going to now talk about how we can navigate clinical trials after hearing about some of the basics of clinical trials and participation. Next slide. So since the clinical trial navigator is a new role, I just kind of want to give you a brief overview of what that role entails and who am I exactly. So I am a family member of people with CF and a former CF research coordinator. I was a coordinator at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill for about 4 years. And then I went on to be a clinical research lead at Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Texas for a little over 2 years. And my role is really to help you understand the clinical trial process, answer any questions you have about trial participation, assist in using the clinical trial finder, and facilitate contact between you and a research site. You can contact me at this email address, and I know that it will be in the chat as well as the resources that will be sent out after the session, and you can expect to hear from me within 2 business days. Next slide. So in addition to talking about navigating clinical trials, I want to go over a handful of resources that are available to you. One is, and the biggest one I would probably say, is the Clinical Trial Finder. And this is a resource provided by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation that allows you to search for clinical trials you may be interested in at your own center or located near you. You can find the Clinical Trial Finder at this web address that will also be provided in the resources. And if you need help utilizing the Clinical Trial Finder, there is a tutorial video on the website, or you can contact me and I can help you walk through the process. Next slide. This is a screenshot of what the Clinical Trial Finder looks like. You can search for trials by age, location, mutation, even how far you're willing to travel, as well as many other filters. You can find trials that are currently enrolling or view study results if they are available. You can contact a research coordinator at an enrolling site to see, just to hear about more information about the trial that you're interested in. And the biggest one right now, and I would say that this is really important, is to sign up for alerts, email alerts, so you can be notified when new trials are posted, especially if you hear about a trial that may not have already started, but you've read a press release about and you're really interested in. This is a good way for you to immediately get alerts whenever a new trial is uploaded onto the Clinical Trial Finder. And from there, you can kind of search through which sites are enrolling and if there's contact information for you to reach out to learn more. Next slide. In general, to learn more about clinical trials, you can go to About Clinical Trials on the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation's website. And this will go over information on how do clinical trials work, why participate in a clinical trial, children in clinical trials, about safety as a priority, your rights being protected, and the difference between interventional and observational trials. Next slide. So I know that we're not going to be going deep into genetic therapies right now, and I know there was a session already about genetic therapies, which will be available on the CF Foundation's YouTube channel after ResearchCon, and all sessions will be available at that point in time. But just to go over a few resources, these are really good resources that you can access just to talk about and to learn more about genetic therapies. I highly recommend going and finding these. These will also be available in the resources in the chat. And these are really for you to take to your provider, take to your care team, take to your research team, and just ask more questions. So one of the resources is just over an overview of understanding genetic therapies. One is a glossary of key terms that we readily use, whether it's care team members or research team members, and just to make yourself more familiar with those. And the biggest one is a list of questions that you can ask before enrolling in a genetic therapy trial. This is a really good way to start that conversation about genetic therapies with your care team, your provider, or your research team. And I do want to mention that these are all available in Spanish on the CF Foundation's Spanish website. Next slide. An additional resource is the regarding genetic therapies and cystic fibrosis is the genetic therapies webinar that was conducted in February of this year. So you can scan the QR code here and it'll take you directly to that link. And otherwise, it is on the CF Foundation's YouTube channel, and I highly recommend, as well as it just being posted here, I highly recommend going and watching it. It was a wonderful webinar and provides a ton of information about genetic therapies. Next slide. So if you're asking, how do I get involved? Whether it be at your CF center, you can talk to your provider about participating. You can ask to speak to your research team if you've never spoken to them before. If it's at a different CF center, you can use the Clinical Trial Finder to search for trials that interest you or are available in your area, and you can talk to your provider about participating in those. I always recommend that if you find something that you're interested in, talk to your provider and your care team first. They are a wonderful resource, obviously, and they can direct you in the right path. But in general, if you have questions about participation, you don't know where to begin, you just need, any information you have questions that you'd like to ask, you can please reach out to me. That is what I'm here for. That is specifically my role. And I can direct you in the right path and provide any resources that are available or put you in contact with the right person. Another good way to help shape future research projects is to join Community Voice. Next slide. And so to discuss Community Voice, what is Community Voice? It's a really good opportunity for people with CF and their family members to share their experiences, perspectives, priorities, knowledge to impact CF research, care, and programs. This is for anyone who is 13 years or older who has CF or is a family member of people with CF. And these are just a few of the upcoming topic areas that they will be discussing. And this is just a really good way to get involved in any capacity. And you can scan the QR code here as well to join. Next slide. A wonderful resource that just was created by Community Voice is how community input drives CF research. So if you're really wanting to participate in research, but you don't necessarily want to participate in a clinical trial quite yet, a few other ways that you can provide input is through driving priorities, informing decision-making, inform funding decisions, partner on study designs, helping with monitoring safety, and sharing research results. And this all can be done through workshops, grant reviews, advisory boards, working groups, and focus groups. Next slide. Lastly, whether you're looking for support or looking to get involved, you can always reach out to outreach@cff.org. This is part of our community partnerships program, and they are able to direct you in pretty much any path that you see that you're interested in wanting more information. Next slide. And now I am going to hand it over to Britney and Martha to discuss some of their community perspectives.
Thanks, Heather. First slide there. Hi, my name is Britney Earwood. I am mom to a person with cystic fibrosis. Sadie is 4 years old. We have taken part in 2 clinical trials, one that she started when she was very, very young and was in for a couple of years. And then the other one we are kind of currently passively in related to one of her medications. But we're happy to be here and talk about our experience. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. My name is Martha. I'm 30 years old, living with cystic fibrosis. I'm an event support specialist for the Minnesota-Dakota chapter of the CF Foundation. And last year, I participated in a clinical trial at my local care center for phage therapy. And I'm excited to talk about that experience with everyone. Next slide, please. So participating in a clinical trial and how I found the clinical trial. So for my phage therapy trial, I communicated with my local care center about my interest in phage therapy. I found a study for nebulized phage therapy out in Madison. And then I was informed of one closer to me in the Twin Cities in Minnesota at my local care center. That would be IV phage therapy. So that is the decision I made after speaking with my care team of what I wanted to do. And then just a quick little, some info on phage therapy. Phage basically uses viruses to treat bacterial infection. It was explained to me as that phage attacks bacteria. It's like a personalized bacteria to fight the bacteria that you're trying to fight out. So for me, phage was going to hopefully fight my Pseudomonas lung infections that I chronically culture. It's a natural enemy to bacteria, and it is found in soil and sewage and water. So it is everywhere. It's all around us, and it's very interesting. And I was definitely excited to learn more about it. So I had a lot of thoughts and feelings going into it that I spoke about with my care team. And Britney, I'm guessing you have a different story of how you came about your clinical trial for your daughter.
Yeah. Ours was a little bit different, much more passive. Our clinical team came to us actually and told us that we qualified for a trial with a modulator. And, whether or not we were interested, they gave us all of the information for it. We took that home, read it over, decided to be part of the trial. For us, it was taking the medication. And then, we would have clinical visits on a regular, we would have the clinical trial visits with our regular clinic visits moving forward. And mostly my thoughts and feelings, I was really excited to have access to a medication that that age group typically isn't qualified for. It's not approved for them. And so for us, I was extremely excited to be part of that trial, more excited than anything else. So, yeah.
And then what did Sadie's clinical trial entail?
For us, it was, so we would go in for our clinic visits are every other month or every third month. So we're in there pretty frequently. So every time we would go in for clinic, Sadie would have to have some additional tests. So we did a sweat chloride almost every time. We did EKGs, blood work. She had an eye exam, not every time, but I want to say probably more than a few times a year she would have an eye exam. She had one where I think they had to put the drops in her So, not incredibly invasive, I think, for the extra stuff that happened in the clinic visit.
Yeah, it sounds like, hopefully not too invasive for her. For me, it entailed a screening prior to see if I was even eligible to start the clinical trial. I had to prove or culture out Pseudomonas first to be eligible. So it was the first time I've ever wanted to grow out Pseudomonas in a culture. And then once I was confirmed eligible, my visits included PFTs, pulmonary function tests, blood work, and then every visit there was a sputum culture as well.
I see. Okay, nice.
Head on over to the next slide. So benefits of a clinical trial. We had already discussed this, or someone else had, about the compensation and travel reimbursement. Did you guys experience that?
We did, yeah. In fact, we used that as a little bit of a bribe for Sadie whenever we had beefier clinical trial visits. That was hers to spend at Target after, in whatever way she wanted. Sometimes we would spend a couple of hours there just wandering the aisles until she found things that she wanted to get. And I'm sure everybody thought we just had a spoiled kid, but she loved it. And that's absolutely where every single dollar that went.
I love that. I wish I did that.
Yeah, treat yourself.
Yeah, I also had the clinic card. So money was added to that after each visit. I had about 7 visits. So that was nice. Travel reimbursement, they paid for parking and even a meal during my first dose of phage therapy. But a big thing for a benefit of a clinical trial for me was helping further CF research. I'm a big believer in basically like paying your dues, like thinking about where we have been in CF research, where we are now, and the possibility of what's to come. So it's really cool for me to think about playing a role in hopefully something good coming our way. So that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, same for us. You say paying your dues. Absolutely. That's kind of how I felt a little bit too, where, we're always trying to figure out how we can give back to the community and how we can further kind of research and progress for treatments and treatment options. And so, yeah, I totally agree with that. The other one for us, and I think you could probably agree, is access to the medication is a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
For us, it was gaining access to a modulator that, again, wasn't currently approved for that age group. We were kind of the guinea pigs for that. And I was, I can't say whether or not having been on the modulator is the thing for her, or if she's just kind of one of those folks that's not as affected. But it was a huge benefit for us to be able to have access to that as young as we did. And I think for you, right, you had access to
yeah, absolutely. I would not have had at that point access to an IV dose of phage therapy for Pseudomonas. So that was very interesting and exciting and scary all at the same time. Just a lot of unknowns then. But another thing that helped those feelings was being able to sit down with the research team. There's a lot of downtime during clinical trials. So I was able to chit chat, have some good conversation, and ask every single question that popped in my head. So shout out to that research team that had to hear me out, but they were fantastic just to sit down, talk about where this study came from, where it's going, and just what's around the corner for, even if it wasn't phage therapy, other studies that can benefit the CF community. It was really cool to hear about.
Yeah, I agree. For us, one, as a parent of a young CFer, just having more access to more science people is like a huge balm to any anxiety you feel. You're constantly checking in with your clinic team and your clinical researcher is huge. And also, I'm just kind of a science nerd, and I'm obsessed with CF research and what's going on with that. And so being able to pick their brains all the time and hear all the cool things that are happening, and especially in the clinical trial, I was constantly Googling like what's happening, so that next time I saw Julie, I could talk to her about it and pick her brain on stuff.
Right? Yeah, nothing wrong with being a science nerd. I think we all are deep down.
I also think more regular testing is another for us. Again, as a parent of a CFer, it's that you spend a lot of time in fear, and so just again being closer to your clinical team and having more regular testing, even if you don't always see the results of those, which is kind of painful part of the clinical trial, but just having that testing and regularly kind of seeing what's going on, again, it's just another one of those opportunities where it kind of just helps you feel a little bit more sane and calm about the state of the world and your kid. And
I bet. Yeah.
That for you was more regular testing beneficial.
I bet. Yeah. Even as a adult, having the regular adult with CF having regular testing, it dawned on me at that point. I considered myself healthy a year ago when entering this trial. So I have never had that regular or consistent of testing healthy. If I've had back-to-back PFTs, it's when I'm sick or in the hospital, not doing well with IVs. So that was new for me to have the regular testing when I'm feeling good. So that was interesting to say the least. You want to head to the next slide, please? So there's benefits, and then also assessing the risk. And for me, a big one with phage therapy, since it's new and it's new and also not in the same sense. So I was concerned about what this could do to me. I'm at the time, like I mentioned, was feeling really good with my health, and I was worried, like, what if this makes me worse? What if I become resistant to this type of phage? Is this something that's going to hurt me in the future, that I become resistant to it and can't use it or benefit from it? So that was definitely a thought process that I had often, and I brought up to my care team. And also side effects. I was worried about what those are, because they mention every possible one, and then there could be other ones that we don't know about in the consent form. So that, of course, was worrisome, and I discussed it with my parents, my care team. But at the end of the day, it's my decision, my choice. But I feel good about it now, but definitely was worth sitting down and having some conversations about.
Yeah, for sure. For us, I think some of the biggest risks was, creating medical fear, having a kid that's getting kind of poked and prodded all the time anyway, comes with additional, like, you've got to kind of talk to them a lot and work with them a lot more when they're going to the doctor, so that they don't become afraid of the doctor, because I want that person to be their friend. And so one big concern that we had was, I don't want to make her afraid of her doctors or afraid of the hospital because she has all of these extra tests and she doesn't really understand why all of this is happening. She's way too young. So that was one. The other one was just extra hospital visits and exposure. Our clinical trial happened during the course of COVID, and we were in a hospital environment a lot over COVID. So that was really scary, kind of going through and being, around sick people more, or being in the hospital more. So that was actually a pretty significant concern of ours. But, as the last bullet says, it's 100% voluntary. You can leave at any point if it gets to be too much, or you do start having side effects, or you just don't feel comfortable doing it anymore. And in fact, we got approved, or the FDA approved Trikafta for 2 and up before her trial was over. She was actually able to start it July of some year, I don't remember, and her trial wasn't over until November. I don't know if I have the dates right there or not, but there were months where we could have had access to Trikafta, and we talked it over with our clinical research team. They were the ones that brought it to us, and they said, hey, if you want to drop, if you want to start this other medication, no hard feelings. We totally get it. We're fine. And, we talked about it at home, and we had just spent so much time with this team, and we had spent so much time with our clinical researcher, that it just felt like, not that we owed it to her, but that we owed it to her, to like finish this out. Because one of the questions I asked was, if we drop out, will we lose the research? And I didn't want to lose the research. I didn't want to lose the hard work that we had put in. And so we decided to stay. But, they were very upfront with us about no hard feelings on that.
That had to have been a difficult decision, but one that they could respect, but yeah, that had to be hard.
Yeah. There was a question in the chat whether or not I was afraid of putting her through something permanent. A little bit. The clinical trials, I think we have a slide for it, but the visits weren't so intensive. I had concerns that, like I said, that I was creating medical fears, or that, having more testing done on a regular basis might kind of create some fears in her, and it just didn't. And in fact, she sat for her pokes for the first time by herself the other day at clinic, and we were like, minds blown. Like it was not a thing before, so it didn't wasn't anything permanent for her. So we were all good then.
It's wild how some kids are so resistant.
She's a trooper, man. Doctor says, open up, let me, we do the throat swabs, and she just sits there like a champ. I don't know where it came from, but
awesome. Good for her.
Yeah.
That's awesome. If you want to head to the next slide, please. So a clinical trial versus a clinic experience. For me, the difference was consistency and my schedule. So when I'm going to my normal clinic visit for a checkup, we go over, the biggest thing is going over the med list and either taking things off of it at the visit or adding things to it, depending on my health and what I need. But for a clinical trial, it was so important and very much stressed that I need to be consistent with medications. I can't, during the trial, I cannot add, I can't take things away. And they made sure during my screening, before I even entered it, that I was a good 30 days out from my last dose of any type of antibiotics. So for phage therapy, I could not be on any bacterial antibiotic for a lung infection. So that definitely wouldn't have happened during a normal clinic visit. They would have seen that I had a lung infection and if needed, put me on antibiotics. But for the clinical trial, that was not the case. Also, the scheduling is a little different. For a clinic visit, it doesn't necessarily matter if I do PFTs first or blood work and then see my doctor. But for the clinical trial, going with consistency again, it was the exact same schedule. Like start with PFTs, then blood work, then going to sputum culture. That could not switch. So that was another big difference between the two. How about you, Brittany? Anything with consistency and scheduling that was different?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a significant difference between clinic visits and the clinical trial. For the time that we were in the clinical trial, they were almost always happening at the same time. So I don't even really think that we had any clinic visits where the clinical trial wasn't happening at the same time. But the biggest difference, less so consistency. There was, for whenever we would go in, it was just kind of, we would fit in the EKG when we could, or we would fit in the sweat chloride when we could. So there didn't necessarily need to be any specific order. And same thing with the medication. Really, it was really just the introduction of the modulator. But the big difference was just the addition of the test. You don't normally get an EKG every time you go in for clinic. And so there was that. And then also for us, preparation, if I'm just going for a clinic visit, I'm not taking a lot. If I know I'm going to be there for the clinical trial, there's a lot that comes with us just to make sure that she's entertained and kept taken care of for the day. So for us, those were the big differences.
And then for me, having my usual CF care team and then kind of having a few new people on my research team, there was some overlap, but just kind of new faces, which nothing wrong with that. Both care team and research team are fantastic. So that was nice.
Yeah, same for us. We just had Julia, and she's our favorite person, and we still see her whenever we go in for clinic visits. I was our only extra face, and she was our favorite face. So still is our favorite face. I love her.
That is great. I think we can head to the next slide.
Mm-hmm. What do we wish we had known about clinical trials?
That is a great question. I think the first one for me is they give you a heads up about the time commitment. You have it right in my consent form. It talked about how many visits, about the time each, or how much time each one would be. But there's always variables when it comes to things like that, whether it was traffic or whether getting in and delaying any type of scheduling, but also you can be prepared, but the days are long. And I know that from long clinic visits in the past and annual visits or annual studies, which tend to be long. But yeah, it's definitely a time commitment. So if anyone's interested, I recommend really sitting down and thinking about if this is something you can do, whether it's for your own personal life, work. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but same. Yeah, I know the paperwork had all of the visits and then, you know, the estimated duration for each visit and kind of what would be happening at each visit. But yeah, it doesn't really hit you until you're there at like hour 6 and you're like, oh, it's a whole day. And so it's same thing. Yeah, just make sure you think about that because, you know, as a parent, you got to take time off of work because, you know, you can't co-work. I assume, Martha, that you couldn't work the days that you were doing your phage.
Very little. I'm lucky to have the option at times for remote work, so I was able to do some, but definitely interrupted a lot of things. But that's what I signed up for.
Yeah, right. The other one for us was I knew going into it that we couldn't get the results, but also not being able to see the results of the sweat chlorides or you know, any of the testing that we did is kind of a bummer just because you want to see whether or not it's actually improving things and or making a difference in your own body or her body.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see that. So it's kind of a bummer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not knowing the results was difficult for me. I guess they told me that ahead of time, but I was kind of hoping I could sneak a peek at my PFT results because the machines are right there in the room with you, but they were tilted off to the side. So there was no peeking or cheating on my end, even though I wanted to. But I was able to, so the 7 visits, I did PFTs for each one. And then that was the study over a course of about a month. Mm-hmm. And then on my own, I had a follow-up appointment for my own, like a normal CF clinic visit where I did PFTs. And I won't say anything about the results, but it was like, oh, okay. Now I can finally like see something.
Nice. So how to get clinic to do a sweat chloride for me.
Yeah, there you go. We can head to the next slide.
How to make clinical trial days fun. A lot. Plan, prepare, Netflix, snacks is like the summary. So the big pieces of advice that I have is bring a greater variety of snacks than you think that you need. So whatever snacks you would normally pack for like a really long day, and then grab like 3 or 4 different ones that they've never had before. Because that's what you want to pull out of your pocket when they're upset or when they're getting bored. I always make sure we had our tablet or some sort of device with a charger. Always making sure that we would download stuff to it ahead of time because even though the hospital has internet, it's not great internet. And I was caught the first visit with not being able to watch any videos or any movies because I didn't download them in advance. Always make sure that you're taking care of yourself too. So we were talking on the last slide about, you know, how much time commitment it takes and how long the day can be. Way longer if you totally forget self-care. So just make sure that you're taking care of yourself too. Bring water for yourself, snacks for yourself, preferably snacks that your child won't steal from you. So things that only you like. Always making sure we brought toys, blankets, and like kind of comfort items are a big one, especially for those longer days. If you've got a younger kiddo, like we would turn off the lights and we would take a nap. Like, sometimes it was during the sweat chloride or during the EKG or some of the more passive tests, just to still get that testing while she was napping. But again, just try to think about if you're going to be gone from home for 8 hours, right? If you're going to like their grandparents or something like that, what are the things that you would take with you? Kind of think about and bring those things. I was joking earlier about like on clinic days, I just take the one bag. Clinical trial days, we're huffing in there with 3 bags in the wagon. We're going up to clinic because I've got 1 bag of just snacks. I've got 1 bag of just comfort items. I've got 1 bag of entertainment items. And then our clinical trial researcher also always brought toys too. So she would come in and there would be like ducks all over the bed, or I think we did Play-Doh one time kind of towards the end. So just, again, keeping in mind that they have a little body and a little brain and very little patience, and you just kind of got to have as many moments in there that you're inserting comfort for them. I don't know about you, Martha. How do you make the trial days fun?
I'm sad I didn't have ducks or Play-Doh or a wagon of goodies, but I did have Wi-Fi and Netflix. Where I did my study was very similar to a typical hospital room. So I had a bed. If I wanted to take a nap, I could have. Netflix, TV, playing on my phone. But there's also, I'm being observed during this. So I personally did not feel comfortable taking a nap while the team's looking at me. But maybe if I was really tired, I would have. But I talked to my team a lot during my trial. So that was great. And then also ate lunch. Because I was going into these appointments or trials fasting for the blood work, and I would always be hungry, and they would always reward me with pizza. So add that to my compensation.
I don't think we ever got pizza.
Oh, well, you guys had ducks and Play-Doh, so I think it evens out. But thinking back, like if I was in high school or college, it would have been a great time to, well, maybe not great, but to have homework. You would have had the time to complete that for sure.
You're not doing anything but clinical trial at those visits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We can head to the next slide, please. Yeah, this is a great one. Like, do not be afraid to ask questions. I definitely bugged my research team with every silly question that popped in my head, and they were great. Like, they made me feel like there's no dumb questions. Nothing is silly. When you're signing up for a clinical trial, you're putting yourself and your body to some extent at risk. So ask away, ask all the questions, and whether that's what are the possible side effects, or what does my care team, like getting any info from the care team. At the end of the day, it's your decision, so they can't make the choice for you, of course, but you can definitely pick their brain about thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, at no point did I ever feel like somebody felt bothered by the questions that we asked. Like, they were always welcomed.
And I don't know about you, but my care team just loved talking about the study and what's to come. And we joke around that we're all science nerds, but it was a room of very many science nerds. So it was the perfect place to ask all the questions, of course.
Yeah. At no point did she ever mind. And I often asked some strange questions. So
I feel like you gotta. We can head to the next slide.
Yeah, I think we talked about this. This is the why right there. I want her disease cured in her lifetime before too much damage is done to her body. And however we need to participate in that to move that forward, we will participate in that. So for us, it's just getting one step closer. I think I heard somebody wrote something in a Reddit thread a while ago where they had said, somebody asked about research, whether or not they felt nervous about the long-term damage of Trikafta. That was the question that was being asked. If people felt nervous about that because there hasn't been enough testing. And somebody had this beautiful answer. She said, regardless of the negative side effects of this medication or the negative side effects of participating in this clinical trial, for example, this is getting me or somebody else to the next step, the next phase. So I'm doing this now so that there's a next step, a next medication, a next clinical trial, a next new place for us to go. And we can't do that if we're not participating in these things and if we're not forwarding that research forward. So for us, those were kind of the pretty significant whys. But I think for you, Martha, you've got a very specific why.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about, like, the stepping stone and helping someone else get to that next step. And that, of course, was on my mind as well. I think about, I was born in 1993, and that is the year Palmazine, a nebulized medication, became available to the CF community. And that has helped many people. It's not a cure by any means, but that's a stepping stone to make, before we get to the cure, we have to have the stepping stones and make things manageable, or hopefully make things easier, manageable for us. So that was my hope with going into phage therapy. And to be honest, I didn't know what phage therapy was until I came across Salt in My Soul, the diary of Mallory Smith, and her documentary, also entitled Salt in My Soul, about a girl with cystic fibrosis and her journey with antibiotic-resistant infections and her family's journey and struggle to get her phage therapy. And it's a beautiful, heartbreaking, inspiring story that stayed with me to the extent that is the biggest reason to why I did the phage therapy clinical trial. And there was even a point where I got a little spooked after reading the consent form and just probably overthinking what I was signing up for. So the night before my IV dose of phage therapy, I rewatched Salt in My Soul, and it just gave me that extra motivation, that push to, and my why, for why I am doing this, for myself, for Mallory, for the CF community that has come before me, and the younger generation, for Brittany's little girl too. Like, there's so many people that have done things for my generation of people with CF that have made my life more manageable, easier, and to just, like you mentioned, having that stepping stone, having that little bit of hopefully a positive effect on research and the future of the CF community is it's a big one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, that was my why. I went on a tangent there, but I think we can, if there are any questions. Oh, we have, I don't know if this is for me or you, but we can probably both answer it. Did you ever feel like it was getting worse before it got better? I'm not sure if you have any thoughts and feelings about that with your experience.
I'll let you go. I feel like you probably, Sadie was so little when she first started.
I'm trying to think. Like, I never had any big aha moment of like, oh, I feel horrible after the dose. I was kind of expecting, I'm like, what if I, like, something even minor of like, it's an IV dose of medication or phage. What if I get nauseous or feel lightheaded? And I never had any immediate effects like that. I was even prepping like my after phage therapy dose, my lunch. I had two options. Like, if I feel good, I'm going to eat pizza. But if I'm nauseous, I need something a little lighter, like toast. But I felt great after my dose, and I ate pizza and the toast. So I was doing great. But I really cannot think of a moment where I'm like, oh, I'm getting worse, or I'm having and that's just me. That is my own experience. I'm not speaking for every single person that has done this trial or a similar one. But yeah, I did not have that type of feeling or mindset.
Yeah, we didn't have that experience either. In fact, things were pretty smooth sailing. At one point, we had to do like a clean out where she had to stop taking the medication for a couple of weeks, and then either restart it or restart another medication. I can't remember. And it didn't go so great then. But but during the clinical trial, nothing like that. Yeah. I think we said it in the last slide, but again, participating in the clinical trial, I think just it keeps the needle moving forward. It keeps the research moving forward, and it just kind of helps us build on all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about where we are now, because where we have been and where we're going to go. And I just know the safe community, we're not stopping until it's done for everyone. And research and clinical trials are what's going to help us do it. So I appreciate everyone being here and helping us and listening to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Martha and Britney, for being willing to share your experience of participating in clinical research. I think now we have some time for some questions. So let's see here. First question, Britney, is for you. How has being part of a clinical trial from so early on affected your outlook for your daughter's health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's certainly provided a more positive outlook. Who knows where her health would be without the clinical trial or without access to that modulator? We can all always speculate. But for us, Sadie is great. She's incredibly healthy. And so participating in this and having access to this has provided a significant amount of hope. It has done for us what I hoped it would do, which is it's made CF a data point for her rather than a defining feature. And that's been amazing. I am incredibly grateful to the clinical team for coming to us and telling us that the study existed. I'm grateful that they allowed us to participate in this and that they stuck with us for the time that we were with them. So yeah, absolutely.
Martha, this question is for you. What was it about phage therapy that interested you, and are you planning to do any clinical trials in the future?
Oh, those are two great questions. As I mentioned, the Mallory Smith story of her and her family was a huge motivation and inspiration for why I was interested initially in phage therapy. And a more personal reason would be I chronically culture out Pseudomonas for my sputum samples, and I have become resistant to not all, but a handful of antibiotics. So there's a need, not just for me and not even just for the CF community, but the world in general for other ways to fight bacteria. And this just seemed like, I don't want to say easy because it's definitely not, but something I could do. So that was definitely a big reason for why I was interested in phage therapy. And I definitely would do another clinical trial, whether it's related to phage therapy or not. The reason I haven't yet is just scheduling. Just pretty busy with work right now, but I would love maybe when things kind of die down a little bit, I would sign up in a heartbeat if it's the right fit. Because my experience was so positive. So I think I think research teams and clinics and care centers do a really good job of, they know the need for research and they need us to do it. So they do a fantastic job of making it a positive experience.
That's so great. That's so great. Katie, how can someone find out about trials near them if they aren't at a center that has research? And what does this coordination between centers look like?
Yeah, so there are a few ways. One, you can directly contact me and I can help you with that. And then also utilizing the clinical trial finder. So like I said, if you do find a trial that interests you, if you scroll down to the very bottom, it will list all sites that are enrolling for that trial and then the contact information for the research site. So that is a great way to find information. Even if you do find that information and you have more questions or you need help facilitating that connection between that center that you found in yourself, you can reach out to me and I can put you in direct contact with the research center. So typically what it looks like is that, your information is we put you in contact with the research center, and then the research center will have an individual call with you and kind of just go over the logistics of the trial to see if it's a good fit for you. And then if it is, we always advise, obviously, talking to your care team and your provider to ensure that they're also on board. And then from there, the research team is in contact with your care team. That is a very good, close-knit relationship that typically occurs. And so there's just really good cross communication and making sure that your safety again is our priority. And so having that communication between the care center, the research team, and yourself is just very, very making sure it's fluid and everyone's kind of like informed and know what's going on. So that's typically how that works. It's a little different with every site, but if you do need help, that's definitely where I kind of come in and I can help with that process.
Okay, let's see. Other questions from the chat. Is there any mental health research being done by the CF Foundation for patients? That's a great question. You guys may have more to add, but I will tell you that the PRIME working group was started by the CF Foundation, and their primary mission is to advance our knowledge of mental health conditions for all people with CF. So I would really encourage you to go on the CF's webpage and search PRIME, that's PRIME, PRIME Working Group, and you can read all about their initiatives and how they're prioritizing mental health research for all patients. So certainly check that out. Let's see. Next question. I have seen some independent research, but is there any larger research on getting the younger than typical children to take pills at an early age? I know that I did a phone interview with Pill Skills, who sent me a kit, but was for 6 and older, and we could use some CF specific advice. I know that is certainly a challenge. I am not aware of any clinical trials looking at this, but I would certainly encourage you to talk with your clinical team, maybe your dietitian. Brittany, you have a young one, less than 6. I
was going to offer this person advice.
Yeah, some great words of wisdom.
She's been swallowing pills since she was like a year old. So yeah, whoever asked this question, if you find me anywhere, or I can share, somebody can share information, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you have on that, because we've got a couple of tricks up our sleeve that we've gotten Sadie to participate in that. So
yeah, I actually I started swallowing pills apparently like very young, and then when I got to like kindergarten, so I'm like 5, 6 years old, I ended up kind of like choking on a crayon pill, and that spooked me, and I struggled with swallowing pills for like several years after that. So I was great as a baby and toddler, and then as a 5-year-old I struggled again for a while, but my parents knew that, and they reached out to my CF care team. It wasn't a part of any clinical research study, but definitely reach out to the CF care team, and they might have some tips or tricks. Again, like Brittany, if you want to reach out, I have a few too, but
yeah,
definitely.
Sure, all of us.
And it worked, because I started swallowing pills again in elementary school, and I haven't had an issue since. But yeah, that's definitely, I think, at one point they brought me to like a speech therapist to do some type of like swallow study. But yeah, there's definitely different ways to go about it. But the best thing to do is to contact your care team.
Those are great tips. Brittany, was it scary to do a clinical trial on your little one? Did you ever have moments of constantly questioning symptoms?
That question's hard to answer, because I do that anyway, regardless of the clinical trial. I think as a parent of a kiddo with an illness, you're just constantly questioning their symptoms. And so yes and no. I don't know that I ever really attributed them to the clinical trial, but I had questions every time we went to clinic or the clinical trial. It would be like, this is going on. Is that related to CF, or is that a pediatrician visit? Or, is this a 4-year-old thing, or is this a clinical trial thing? What's going on? So yeah, but I don't know that I ever attributed to this a clinical trial. I think for me, the clinical trial gave us more health benefits than it gave us scary ones.
Let's see. I'm still learning about this phage therapy. So is it at all possible for the phage to give you a virus? So Martha, you may certainly have something to add here from, I'll go ahead and jump in. You know, a phage is not like a virus that makes you sick. Phages are very specialized viruses that attack a very specific bacteria. And so they're generally safe. But Martha, do you want to add on how that was explained to you when you entered the study?
Yeah, so that's basically how they explained it to me, that it's pretty much, in very, very simple terms, personalized bacteria to fight your bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the tricky part of it, is trying to match up the phage with the infection that you have, and that it only attacks bacteria, to my understanding. I'm not a doctor, so don't quote me on anything here, but it made it sound like it wasn't going to attack or hurt any other part.
Mm-hmm.
It was rather, it was going to match up and be like hit or miss with the bacteria, my Pseudomonas in my lungs that I was trying to fight. And it's basically a natural enemy to bacteria. As I mentioned, it's found in like all bacteria everywhere, but specifically like soil and sewage and water. So yeah, they gave me, they had to like dumb it down for me, because I'm like, I need it in very simple terms to understand. So yeah, it's definitely, it's hard to explain. And I definitely feel like my team did a really good job to be like, oh, okay, that definition works for me. Personalized bacteria.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So we have time, I think, for maybe one more question. This has been some really great discussion. What clinical trials are being done to look at the intestinal part of the disease? And Katie, I think that's probably a great question for you to answer. I think the one that comes to my mind is the anagram study, which is an enzyme study. But if patients have more questions or want to know, exactly what studies are being conducted for different things, like we had some questions on GI or hormones or lung transplant, is the clinical trial finder the best place for them to go?
Yes, I would say the clinical trial finder, or reaching out to me. The other thing that's currently going on is that the Therapeutic Development Network created regional cooperatives in the last 2 years. And so there are about 20 cooperatives throughout the US, and they're all based on region. And this is really pairing up research teams and care teams that are within certain surrounding states. And sometimes the trials that are being conducted in those regions may not be on the clinical trial finder. So another good, always ask your provider what's going on. Always ask if there's additional research that's going on that you may not be able to find in the clinical trial finder, but it may be being conducted at your site or at a site near you within your region. And you can also reach out to me and I can help find that information. But that's just an additional way of getting a little more information. Again, you can never go wrong asking your provider for extra information or asking to speak to your research team.
That's great. Great information. Great information. All right, Martha, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone again for participating and for the great questions. It's been fun. Before you go, please fill out the satisfaction poll, which is under the poll tab on the right-hand side of your screen, right next to the session chat. There are many wonderful resources related to this discussion, including slides from today in the resource document found on the reception page. Please spend some time exploring the resources and download anything you want to keep. Thank you guys again for everyone who is a part of this. We appreciate your support and hope to see you next time. Bye.
Hello again, everyone. My name is Shiny, and I'm one of the co-chairs for ResearchCon this year. And wow, what a great day one for this year's ResearchCon. Great job, Art. You did a fantastic job kicking us off with JP. And I'm always in awe and excited about clinical trials and what's to come. We have made great strides in research pipeline.
I agree. It was a great day one. I enjoyed all the content presented today, and especially the excitement around new therapeutics and development, learning about clinical trials, and how patients can participate in upcoming trials.
Right? We had so many great speakers and topics today. And for those of you that may have missed a session or two, no worries. They will be available on the CF Foundation YouTube channel. And don't forget to come back tomorrow for more hot topics.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another great day of programming for y'all, including sessions on CF-related liver disease and reproductive health, roundtable discussions on non-modulator patients and pain management, and our keynote presentation on organ transplants and the evolving CF care model. So go get some rest, and we will see you all tomorrow. And for those of you who don't do time math well, like me, that will be at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 Central, 4 Mountain, and 3 Pacific.